Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Sam Fury Show. This episode is a summary of the book Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. It explores the dual nature of human thinking, highlighting the contrast between our fast, intuitive responses and slow, deliberate reasoning. The book examines how these cognitive processes shape our judgments, often leading to biases and errors, revealing the complexities of human decision-making. Part 1. Two Systems. Chapter 1. The Characters of the Story. This chapter delineates the dichotomy between two modes of thinking: fast, intuitive System 1, and slow, deliberate System 2, revealing how they interact and influence our decisions. You need to recognize when System 1 might lead to errors, and to consciously engage System 2 in high-stakes situations to avoid significant mistakes. Chapter 2. Attention and Effort. This chapter emphasizes the demanding nature of System 2, which governs effortful, deliberate thinking, contrasting it with the more automatic System 1. Recognize that while System 2 is essential for complex tasks requiring focus and self-control, it is naturally lazy, often ceding control to the more efficient, yet sometimes error-prone System 1. Chapter 3. The Lazy Controller. There is a tendency for System 2, the deliberate and reasoning part of the mind, to be lazy, often defaulting to intuitive but flawed judgments from System 1. Self-control and cognitive effort draw from the same limited pool of mental energy, making it crucial to be aware of when we might be relying too heavily on quick, intuitive thinking rather than engaging in thorough, rational analysis. Chapter 4. The Associative Machine. System 1, our brain's automatic processing unit, creates coherent responses by linking ideas through associations, often without our conscious awareness. Understand that our thoughts, emotions, and even behaviors can be subtly influenced by unrelated stimuli. It is important to be mindful of these automatic processes that shape our perceptions and actions without us realizing it. Chapter 5. Cognitive Ease. This chapter delves into the concept of cognitive ease, showing how a state of mental comfort influences our beliefs, decision-making, and susceptibility to illusions of truth and familiarity. Cognitive ease makes us more likely to trust, believe, and accept information without critical analysis, while cognitive strain prompts deeper, more analytical thinking. It is important to be mindful of these mental states when evaluating information. Chapter 6. Norms, Surprises, and Causes. Our minds, particularly System 1, construct norms and causal connections to make sense of the world, often leading to automatic interpretations and sometimes surprising insights. Our minds rapidly form expectations and causal stories based on patterns and past experiences, which shape our perceptions and reactions. This highlights the importance of being aware of these automatic processes when interpreting events. Chapter 7. A Machine for Jumping to Conclusions. Our minds, particularly System 1, often jump to conclusions based on limited information, creating a coherent story that may overlook ambiguity and suppress doubt. We must be cautious of our tendency to make quick decisions based on incomplete information, as our minds naturally fill gaps with assumptions that can lead to overconfidence and biased judgments. Chapter 8. How Judgment Happens. Our minds, particularly System 1, effortlessly generate intuitive judgments by substituting easy questions for harder ones, often leading to quick but potentially flawed conclusions. Our judgments are influenced by automatic processes and basic assessments that happen without our awareness, making it crucial to recognize when these quick evaluations might need further scrutiny to avoid errors. Chapter 9. Answering an Easier Question. Our brains instinctively replace difficult questions with simpler ones, producing quick responses that may lack accuracy. Recognizing this can help us make more thoughtful decisions. Part 2. Heuristics and Biases. Chapter 10. The Law of Small Numbers. There is a human tendency to overestimate the significance of small sample sizes, leading to incorrect causal conclusions from random events. Small samples are prone to extreme outcomes, but these results often reflect randomness rather than meaningful patterns. Relying on larger samples helps avoid misleading conclusions. Chapter 11. Anchors. Initial exposure to a specific number, even if irrelevant, significantly influences subsequent judgments, a phenomenon known as anchoring. Be mindful of anchors, as they can subconsciously skew your decisions. Counteract this by critically assessing the information at hand or actively considering alternative perspectives. Chapter 12. The Science of Availability. The availability heuristic influences our judgments by causing us to overestimate the frequency or importance of events based on how easily they come to mind. Recognize that ease of recall can distort your perception of reality, leading to biased judgments. Counter this by questioning whether your impressions are driven by vivid memories or actual frequency. Chapter 13. Availability, Emotion, and Risk. The availability heuristic, intertwined with emotions, skews public perception of risk, often leading to exaggerated fears and distorted priorities in public policy. Emotional reactions and media coverage heavily influence risk perception, necessitating a balance between expert analysis and public sentiment to create effective and rational policies. Chapter 14. Tom W.'s Specialty. People often rely on representativeness over base rates when making judgments, leading to common cognitive errors in probability assessments. To avoid mistakes, anchor your judgments in base rates and critically evaluate the relevance and quality of specific evidence rather than relying solely on stereotypes or intuition. Chapter 15. Linda. Less is more. People's judgments often defy logic, as shown by the Linda problem, where intuition overrides probability, leading to the conjunction fallacy. Intuition can lead us astray by making complex, plausible scenarios seem more likely than simpler, logically sound ones, emphasizing the need for deliberate reasoning. Chapter 16. Causes trump statistics. People tend to prioritize causal stories over statistical reasoning, leading them to ignore base rates in favor of more relatable or stereotypical explanations. Human judgment is often swayed more by vivid, causal narratives than by abstract statistical data, which suggests that individual cases are more effective in changing perceptions than general statistics. Chapter 17. Regression to the mean. People often misattribute the natural tendency of extreme performances to regress toward average outcomes to causal factors like praise or punishment. Understand that fluctuations in performance or outcomes often revert to the mean due to chance, not necessarily because of interventions, and avoid drawing false causal conclusions from these changes. Chapter 18. Taming intuitive predictions. Intuitive predictions, often driven by System 1, tend to be overly extreme and non-regressive, leading to biased judgments that ignore statistical realities like regression to the mean. Correct intuitive predictions by incorporating a baseline and adjusting for the strength of the evidence, ensuring a more balanced and accurate forecast that avoids the common pitfall of overconfidence. Part 3. Overconfidence. Chapter 19. The Illusion of Understanding. The chapter delves into the narrative fallacy and the illusion of understanding, highlighting how simplified, coherent stories of success and failure create a misleading sense of knowledge and predictability. Be cautious of overestimating your understanding of events shaped by luck. Recognize the limits of hindsight and the influence of cognitive biases like the halo effect and outcome bias. Chapter 20. The Illusion of Validity. People often trust their judgments and predictions, even when evidence shows they are unreliable. Confidence in predictions is often based on coherent but flawed stories rather than accuracy. Recognizing the limits of expertise and the unpredictability of the world is crucial for making better decisions. Chapter 21. Intuitions versus formulas. Statistical algorithms are superior over human intuition in making predictions and decisions, especially in uncertain environments. Relying on simple, objective formulas often outperforms expert judgment. Incorporating structured methods over intuition enhances decision-making accuracy, particularly when consistency is crucial. Chapter 22. Expert Intuition. When can we trust it? The validity of expert intuition depends on a predictable environment and extensive practice. Trust expert intuition only when it is developed in a stable, regular environment with ample feedback. Subjective confidence alone is not a reliable indicator of accuracy. Chapter 23. The Outside View. Optimistic predictions based on personal experience often disregard broader statistical realities, leading to significant underestimations of time and risks. This is the planning fallacy. Avoid the planning fallacy by using the outside view, which involves comparing your project to similar past cases to create more realistic forecasts, thereby mitigating the risks of overly optimistic planning. Chapter 24. The Engine of Capitalism. Optimism and overconfidence often lead individuals and organizations to underestimate risks and overestimate their control over outcomes. Temper optimism by considering external factors, potential competition, and unknown risks, and use tools like a pre-mortem to anticipate and address possible failures before committing to major decisions. A pre-mortem is a strategic exercise where a team envisions a project's failure in advance to identify potential risks and challenges, allowing them to address issues before they arise. Part 4. Choices. Chapter 25. Bernoulli's Errors. This chapter highlights the flaws in Bernoulli's expected utility theory by revealing how it fails to account for reference points and changes in wealth, which significantly influence human decision-making. People's choices are shaped not just by absolute wealth, but by gains and losses relative to their prior situation, suggesting that theories of decision-making must incorporate the role of psychological reference points. Chapter 26. Prospect Theory. Prospect theory challenges Bernoulli's expected utility model by introducing the concepts of reference points, loss aversion, and the psychological impact of gains and losses, ultimately redefining how people evaluate risk and make decisions. Human decision-making is deeply influenced by perceived gains and losses relative to a reference point, with losses generally looming larger than gains, which has significant implications for understanding risk aversion and behavior under uncertainty. Chapter 27. The Endowment Effect. Ownership increases the perceived value of an item due to loss aversion, leading people to demand more to give up an item than they would be willing to pay to acquire it. Ownership skews perception of value, making losses feel more significant than equivalent gains, which biases decisions and favors the status quo. Chapter 28. Bad Events. Loss aversion, a psychological tendency where losses weigh more heavily than gains, influences human behavior, decision-making, and even societal structures, leading to an inherent bias toward maintaining the status quo. Loss aversion deeply shapes decisions and negotiations, often making people more resistant to change and leading them to value potential losses more than equivalent gains, which affects everything from personal choices to legal outcomes. Chapter 29. The Fourfold Pattern. People's decisions are influenced by the fourfold pattern, where the psychological weighting of probabilities, rather than rational calculation, drives choices, leading to common biases such as overvaluing unlikely outcomes and being risk-averse with gains and risk-seeking with losses. The fourfold pattern reveals that our decision-making often deviates from rational expectations, leading to costly biases like paying more for certainty, overvaluing unlikely events, and refusing to cut losses in desperate situations. Chapter 30. Rare Events. Rare events are psychologically overestimated and overweighted due to vivid imagery and emotional responses, leading people to make decisions that are disproportionate to the actual probabilities. Vivid and emotionally charged events lead to irrational overestimation of risks, driving decisions based on fear rather than logical assessment of probabilities. Chapter 31. Risk Policies. The chapter explores the impact of narrow versus broad framing on decision-making, particularly how people's natural aversion to loss leads to inconsistent and often suboptimal choices. Adopting a broad, systematic approach to risk, rather than evaluating each decision in isolation, can reduce the influence of loss aversion and lead to better long-term outcomes. Chapter 32. Keeping Score. Mental accounts and the anticipation of regret skew decision-making, causing people to make choices that prioritize emotional comfort over logical outcomes, often at a financial or personal cost. Chapter 33. Reversals. Our judgments and decisions are often inconsistent due to the influence of emotional responses and the context in which choices are made. Single evaluations lead to inconsistent judgments because they are heavily influenced by emotional reactions, while joint evaluations, which engage more rational thinking, often produce more consistent and reasoned decisions. Chapter 34. Frames and Reality. The framing of information significantly influences our decisions and perceptions, often overriding rationality. The way choices are presented can lead to inconsistent decisions and preferences, as people are more influenced by the framing of outcomes than by the actual content, highlighting the power of subtle cues in shaping our reality. Part 5. Two Selves. Chapter 35. Two Selves. This chapter delves into the concept of the two selves, the experiencing self and the remembering self, and how they influence our perception of pain and pleasure. Our decisions and memories are often dominated by the remembering self, which prioritizes peak moments and endings, leading to choices that may not align with our actual experiences, revealing an inherent conflict in how we evaluate and learn from life events. Chapter 36. Life as a Story. People perceive life as a series of significant events rather than a continuous experience, with the ending often defining the overall narrative. We tend to prioritize memorable moments over the actual duration of experiences, revealing that our remembering self often overrides the experiencing self, shaping our decisions and how we evaluate life events. Chapter 37. Experienced Well-Being. This chapter examines the distinction between experienced well-being and life satisfaction, revealing that while money and circumstances impact both, they do so differently, with income beyond a certain level failing to enhance day-to-day happiness. Life satisfaction and experienced well-being are distinct. Policies should prioritize reducing suffering by focusing on time use, addressing depression, and alleviating extreme poverty. Chapter 38. Thinking about life. People's judgments about life satisfaction are often distorted by the focusing illusion, where attention to specific aspects of life overshadows broader, long-term well-being. Be cautious of decisions influenced by temporary emotions or focused attention on singular aspects, as they may lead to long-term dissatisfaction due to misjudged priorities. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Sam Fury Show. If you found this episode useful, let me know with a like, follow, and share. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to visit samfury.com and join my free newsletter. As a subscriber, you'll receive no more than one email a week containing a roundup of my latest posts, as well as exclusive content which is only for my mailing list. It's completely free to join at samfury.com.